Hey there, I am Kathy Sipple, and I was asked to do a talk today at the Outdoor Adventure Festival at the Indiana Dunes National Park. I'm so excited that we now have a national park. And so it wasn't clear what they wanted me to do the talk on. I do a lot of different things, so I kind of came up with the idea to talk about time banking. And since we're in the tourism building, that's where we're staging this talk today, I said, let's call it passport to the outdoors. Time banking can be your passport to the outdoors, but it also can be your passport to just about anything that you want to unlock, honestly. If you want to know other things about the environment, if you want to just have an outdoor adventure, if you want to make new friends that have similar interest in the outdoors, really it can be good for any of these things and so much more than I can possibly, put into a single talk. But just a little bit about me. My background is very, very eclectic. I was just telling the gentleman, come on in, hi, welcome.
Sure.
We're taping today since we had a huge audience.
Standing
Standing room only, and we wanted to make sure others who couldn't be here today and fit in this very small venue could get to it. But anyway, just to back up for a second, we're talking about something called time banking, if you're not familiar with that. It does tie into the activism, but it also ties into how to just enjoy the outdoors. So where are you all from?
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, okay. So do you get up this way very often?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we actually all do because family, Chicago.
Okay,
So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, the good news is there is actually a time bank in Indianapolis and in Chicago as well. So as you can use a passport to travel with you, hours that you time bank in one place could be from somewhere else. And what about you, ma'am? Where are you from?
Same as them.
Oh, okay.
We're together.
We're all
Gotcha. You
together.
guys are just.
We're not gonna sit together.
All right, okay,
We sat in
cool.
a car together.
Yeah, hey,
Like a
no,
little extra space.
no judgment, spread out, make yourselves comfortable. So in any case, it was kind of fun for me to have this challenge. They asked me to do a talk today, and this is kind of what I came up with. It's like how you can access resources in the environment for you to be able to enjoy. So this is just a little bit about me and how I came to have this eclectic viewpoint and how I gathered all this information. I actually graduated from the University of Michigan back in the 80s with a degree in economics. So why do I have the School of Natural Resources and Environment? I tried to take every class I could that was about the environment. So I took economics of sustainable forestry, economics of sustainable fishing. It awakened my love for the environment way back then. I knew that there was more to the economy than just money. It's just really hard to put a value on environment. And then quite frankly, I didn't do very much with that degree for quite a long time. Like I said, that was 88 when I graduated, and I've pretty much been in sales and marketing almost my entire career. So now I feel like I'm kind of a salesperson and a marketer for people to get more involved with the environment. And so little pieces, I never got my master's degree, but I've gotten all these master certifications. I've gotten a master recycler and composter, Indiana Master Naturalist, Indiana Master Urban Farming Program, Indiana Master Watershed Steward Program, and then just in August I went up to Minneapolis and did some training with Al Gore for the Climate Reality Leadership. And I've also been certified down in Indy, is where I took my class for the Hoosier Mushroom Society. So I'm kind of like a notary public for wild mushrooms. If somebody brings me a mushroom, I can say, yes, that is a morel. Yes, that is a chicken of the woods. So green drinks. Kids are actually allowed at green drinks, so this is not about just drinking martinis or whatever. If you don't know about green drinks, this is something that happens in about, kind of varies, 500 to 600 different cities all over the world, and I believe there is one down in Indy and in Chicago, as well as here in Northwest Indiana. But I heard about green drinks and I wondered, why don't we have that here? So I started it, and I ran that for 4 years, and it was a great environmental speaker every month. We had great talks about how to do a rain garden, how to, what's going on with the Indiana trails and bike paths, just many, many, many different things. As you can imagine, it was almost 50 presenters over 4 years doing a talk a month. So it's just kind of like an environmentally themed happy hour, but also with pizza and soda, so kids can come. But that is a fun thing. Got me a little frustrated though, because we were like butts in chairs every month learning about stuff, but it really didn't engage you. How can you build a rain garden? How can I get involved with this, that, or the other thing? And then the other thing is sometimes you have a smaller audience than you expected for whatever reason. It's quality, not quantity. But Catherine here is helping me record this today so that we can share it with a larger audience. Seeing that sometimes we only had 10, 20, 30 people that would come to a specific green drinks where it was a vital topic for people to know about to take care of our environment, I was incented to start the 219 Green Connect podcast. So 219 is a nod to our local area code, and green, this started at like 12 years ago. I wasn't really thinking sustainable, but I just called it Green Connect. I just wanted to connect all the green dots here in Northwest Indiana. So that's available on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever podcasts are found. And there are, I think, about 90 episodes there. So that kind of extended, the reach of the talks that I was doing monthly with the green drinks. But then, people started to know me as like, you're the mushroom lady, or you're the composter lady, or you're, whatever you are. And hey, could you come do this talk, or could you donate? The Dunes Learning Center here is a really, worthy local nonprofit. They asked me to donate a wild edible hike because they wanted me to show everybody where to find my prized mushrooms. If you know anything about morels, you don't really want to tell people where you find your morels. And, this is not paid, and I didn't have a really direct connection with that particular organization, and every organization was asking me to kind of do similar things. And I just thought, man, to save my sanity, I've got to go back to that economics degree and figure out a better way to catch this energy, because I could wear myself out getting paid nothing, and there's no reciprocity. There's nobody that knows all the different things I'm doing. So this has a happy ending. I found the sanity. That challenge from the Dunes Learning Center, what I said was, you know what? That's a reasonable request. Like, I can't ask you to pay me to do a wild edible hike, because they were planning to raffle it off to do a fundraiser. So that would be insane for them to shell out money just to turn around and make money. So I said, how about this? You guys have a beautiful lodge at your place. Well, I thought I had a picture of their beautiful lodge, but somehow that didn't show up. They have a beautiful lodge, and I said, would it be possible for me to host a meeting there sometime? And we'll call that even, because that would be $200-300 to rent it otherwise, and to take out 4 or 5 people for hours on some fall day or spring day, that would probably be worth a couple $100. So based on me being able to broker that transaction, that was the first of many where I started to see like, hey, there's a tit for tat, there's this or that, this is working. However, that's still bartering. So bartering, it takes a lot of energy figuring out, this is what I have, this is what you have. This is what eventually led me to start a time bank. And just, Catherine happens to be in the time bank, but anybody over here have any exposure with time banking?
I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it. You are not alone. Unfortunately, this is something that I think its time has come. I don't know why every town in America and all over the globe, honestly, doesn't have a time bank. But basically what a time bank allows you to do, let me see if I've got a better slide for it. Yeah, I do, but of course it's not the next one. So I'll just try to quickly explain. It is unlike bartering because, number one, everybody's hour is equal. So do you have a part-time job by any chance?
God, I wish.
Okay. Do you ever babysit or anything like
Yeah.
that? Okay. Can I ask how much is the going rate for babysitting?
There isn't a fixed rate. It's whatever I get paid.
Back in the day, I made like $1 an hour or $2 for the really unruly kids, but I bet it's a lot more than that, right? Okay. And I don't want to put you on the spot, sir, but can I reasonably assume that you might make some multiple of that amount that she gets for babysitting?
That'd be fair to say.
Okay.
Yes.
In the time bank, however, you would earn exactly the same amount of credit if you rake somebody's yard for an hour and you, what do you like to do?
Definitely not rake
Not rake.
somebody's yard.
Well, that's the cool thing too, is you're never obligated to do any kind of particular thing. You can do whatever you want to do. And, if people say, oh, I don't have time, it's like, well, would you have time if you weren't raking your yard? If you could get a real energetic, young group of kids to rake your yard, then what time would that free up for you to maybe teach guitar lessons or some, dream that you kind of let go of, way back when. So it's pretty cool. So it's based on reciprocity also. Sometimes when I do this talk, people are like, no, I'm a volunteer. That's part of my identity. I just volunteer, and it's only good if you volunteer. If you're getting something back, that somehow devalues the volunteering. But if you really think that through, for somebody to give the gift that they really want to do, they need a receiver, you know? And let's say you're new in town. Have you ever been new in town? And it can be kind of hard to network in a new community and find out, well, where are the people who like the mushroom hunting? Where are the people who do fill in the blank? I mean, what kind of things do you guys like to do? Do you do any outdoor kind of activities as a family? What kind of things?
Go to parks.
Go to parks? Okay. And you might want to know, well, where are the coolest hiking parks? Of course, you can come to the visitor center, you know, and they'll tell you, and they're great. I'm not trying to diss, you know, the visitor center, but maybe you actually want like a friend to hike with, or maybe you want an exercise buddy, or maybe you want to borrow a backpack, or maybe you want to, you know, borrow whatever the heck. Maybe you want to borrow a canoe, all those kinds of things. These kinds of resources get unleashed in a time bank. So I'll continue. In any case, the reason I have this is because I got inducted into the Northwest Indiana Society of Innovators, the Purdue host, for my invention of the time bank.
Good job, Purdue.
Yeah,
That's right.
thanks. Thank you. I feel kind of like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life with his little savings and loan. You know, it's not like a big bank. It doesn't have any money, but to me, it's got something more valuable than money. It's got the ability to connect people and hopefully make them happy if they get to do more of what they like. When we first started the time bank, we did a crowdfunding campaign to bring an expert in from Portland, Maine. And we were brand new. And she asked me this question that seemed a little crazy at the time. She said, well, what is your time bank about? I'm like, well, how is it about anything? We just formed. Like, we're barely knowing each other. You know, we're not about anything. But because I'm so interested in the environment, I kind of tended to bring people in that cared about the environment. So most recently, I'd say we've been trying to give that focus kind of through climate. We've got some younger people in the room. Do you guys ever get a little fearful about climate? Yeah? Okay. I have to say, we have a 19-year-old member who joined earlier in the year, and I do not have kids, so I don't know that I was exactly as aware as I could have been or should have been. Kind of gets me like almost welling up a little bit, but she actually had like climate anxiety, you know, and she really, yeah?
Yeah.
When I saw how important that was to her, I said, I'm not gonna use her name here in case she doesn't want that shared, but I just said, you know what, I'm gonna make a commitment that we're gonna harness some power in the time bank to put an effort in to figure out what we're gonna do about climate. Like, you know, I'm not magical, but I'm in, I'll help. So we both started reading this book, Drawdown. Has anybody heard of that book? Drawdown refers to, it refers to drawing down carbon from the atmosphere. And this guy, Paul Hawken, who wrote the book, he didn't invent any of these solutions, but he basically used peer research to figure out what are the top 100 solutions to draw down carbon from the atmosphere. And if we did these things to scale, by the year 2050, we would not only slow global warming, but reverse it. So when I heard about this, it just brought me a lot of hope, and I knew it would bring this young woman who's a friend of mine hope too, and it did. So I love that book, and kind of based on that book, I helped her, along with several other adult allies, many of them Time Bank members. We were able to support her to lead a local climate youth rally on September 20th. So just a few, did you do that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. So it was all, you know, in conjunction with Greta's, you know, big kickoff event that she did last year. And it was great. You know, she had over 130 people there. This was pretty good representative crowd. It's like herding cats, you can never get everybody in. But instead of it being just a strike, it was really a rally for solutions. And I felt like that was so positive, because if you're just against something, like, what are you exactly doing? You know, we can do a strike, we can do a rally, but, you know, they had things you can see really prominently in the front, Project Drawdown, and they had a lot of those different solutions. So Project Drawdown is very geomechanistic, I think is the word. It's kind of like looking at the world as a machine, and there's some math involved. How much carbon can you draw down? And part of me, I mentioned I went to University of Michigan. I ended up with an economics degree. I started in engineering, and I failed second semester calculus. So math was not really my jam, but there's something there about math that feels like, hey, if we knew the problem to solve and we can do the math, this can work. This is really cool. So part of me loved that. But then there was this other book that I just got introduced to this year that kind of rocked my world. I couldn't rest with just the drawdown thing. Charles Eisenstein has written a lot of books, including Sacred Economics and The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, all like really feel-good spiritual books. This one is called Climate, A New Story. And he said, hey, we've known about this math for kind of many decades. And I had to say I was right, because I told you I went to college in the 80s, and I'm one of those adults that like I knew, but I didn't know what to do in my normal life to make that not happen. So that was very frustrating. So this is just one of my favorite quotes from his book. He says, you know, Earth is alive. What is alive? We can love. What we love, we wish to serve. When what we love is sick, we want to ease its suffering and serve its healing. And yes, this is me hugging a tree. I'm literally a tree hugger. I hug many
It's
trees.
official.
What's that?
It's official.
It's official. Yeah, I just hugged a tree yesterday, but this is like my favorite tree. This is at the Indiana Dunes at the Dune State Park on Trail 9. And to me, it has always looked like a bear. Like when you come up on it, it's kind of like got its little nubby arms outstretched. And I'm like, how could you pass that by? I don't know how people can pass by without giving it a bear hug. I'm like, come on, people. It's got little ears. And there are even little bear cubs at its side, you know. So I hug it every time I go by. This one time when I hugged it, it was January 1st of 2016, because I go rain, shine, snow, sun. This is January 1st. It was pretty darn cold. I hugged it, and my husband's always there with our dog, and he's like, all right, what'd the tree say today? Because also, I'm not just a tree hugger, but I'm a tree communicator as well. So, yes, hello, crazy people on YouTube land. But just by the way, it's not actual speaking, but it's just little messages that I get. And on this particular day, like, I'll just give you one other thing. As I mentioned about you in Detroit, there's Unity in the Community is the time bank there. One time the tree said to me in a thought form that was not my own, because I'd never once thought of this word in this way, the word community. The tree said, come unity, community. And I'm like, oh my gosh, tree, that is fantastic. I have never once thought of breaking up the word community as an invitation into unity. I'm like, that is beautiful. And it was not my thought. So I don't know if the tree's an antenna, whatever, but I will say there are some scientists that have now done research, like Suzanne Simard in British Columbia is one of my favorites. She's got a great TED Talk about how the trees communicate through the mycelium network below the forest. It's kind of like the internet of the forest, basically. So they share resources, they share food, they share warnings about pests that are coming. And so, you know, it's not completely maybe unheard of that a human might be able to adapt to their language and figure it out. But on this day, the tree said something a little longer, and it first said, can you hang on a second? I am a tree, and you're usually like kind of hug and go, so just slow your roll. So I waited very patiently, and on this day there was kind of a pulsing, and the tree said, again, not out loud, but in a thought form, I want to know if you'll partner with me to bring bear medicine from the forest out into the world. And the tree's never once directly asked me a favor, but it was kind of like that young woman getting so worked up about climate. I'm like, how am I going to say no to a tree? So I said yes. When I went back to my husband and he asked me, what did the tree say today? I told him, and he asked me, what is bear medicine? And I, honest to God, had never heard of it. I never thought of it. I mean, the tree kind of looks like a bear, so there's that. But I went back home and I started Googling, and I asked in this Facebook group called Sisterhood of the Talking Trees. I was like, if anybody would know, these gals will know. I'm like, do you know what is up? What is bear medicine? What did I just promise this tree? And, you know, they said basically it's what you think it is, but usually it's healing a community rather than being a healer to an individual. So I thought long and hard that day, like, how would you heal a community? And I was like, well, if people didn't feel so alone, if people could get the resources that they needed, regardless of what your checkbook says, you know, if you can afford it, if you could just find that exercise buddy, if you could find that person that would show you the cool trails, if you could find that person that would show you where you can find the mushroom that you want to find, or where you can borrow that equipment. I'm like, I think that would go a long way to healing the community. So I started a time bank. I applied for a time bank that day. So since that day, January 1st of 2016 through now, I keep switching the lens. You know, what is our time bank about? What can I really do? What's going to be interesting to me? And I just created this little graphic yesterday to kind of help me focus on where are the biggest pieces, the biggest influences that I see right now. Paul Hawken with Drawdown, I do like that math. I'm not ready to just scrap that completely. I think those are really good marching orders to figure out, like, hey, what can we do? How quick do we need to do it? And to what scale? Charles Eisenstein, his big message is, beyond telling people the data, you gotta wake them up here. You gotta make them love the earth. Like, if they don't love the earth, you can know all the math that you need to, and you're not gonna change what you do. His other big thing is, there's a lot of angry people that do marches, and it's really easy to like hate the bad people that are doing the bad things to the environment. But we all, most of us, eat a hot dog sometime, or get in a car, or whatever, use a plastic straw, or we do something that is in a little way hurtful to the earth. There's hardly any of us that are completely unscathed. So he calls it othering, when we other those people that are the bad people. And I'm not talking about just outright like dumping toxic stuff into the lake, but whatever that other looks like, we really have to build a story that makes people want that good story, so it's gotta be pretty positive. So when I look at, all the areas of overlap, because I'm a big fan of Venn diagrams, otherwise my mind just goes haywire and I could be going down a lot of rabbit holes. But for me right now, the most promising area in the middle is something called regenerative agriculture, or sometimes called permaculture. They're not maybe 100% interchangeable, but do you guys kind of have some familiarity? A little bit? Some head nods? Okay. For out in YouTube land, in case you don't know, permaculture is just a portmanteau that means permanent plus agriculture, two words smashed up together, but it also stands for just culture in general. It doesn't have to do doesn't have to do with food, doesn't have to absolutely do anything with agriculture. So I really look at my time banking project as social permaculture. I've had some teachers in permaculture tell me that actually growing tomatoes together, or fill in the blank, even building a food forest is kind of easy. It's getting the people to work together that's the hard part. So if we want to do these regenerative agriculture projects that Paul Hawken talks about in Drawdown, and Charles Eisenstein also is a big advocate of in Climate a New Story, like, we need some skills, we need some land, we need some particular kinds of plants, we need some equipment, this kind of thing. So how would we do that? Another couple things that are in the Paul Hawken Drawdown, just FYI, reduced food waste is number 3. So to me, that's so encouraging. Like, who can't do that? And when you compost your food waste, there's 2. Composting the food waste is number 60. So that's pretty cool. And eating a plant-rich diet. If you're eating a plant-rich diet, then all of your food scraps, you don't have to worry about, oh, that's meat, that's cheese, that's dairy. And I'm not saying I'm a vegan or even a vegetarian. I'm kind of a freegan. If you give me something for free, I usually will eat it. But I try to do plant-rich, So anyway, there's a lot going on there that actually supports, regenerative agriculture. And, where I see the overlap with time banking, especially if that time bank has an environmental focus, it doesn't mean that we have to strictly only do things in the time bank that have environmental focus. There's a pretty little area of overlap. So there's just the slide for regenerative agriculture on Drawdown. If you go to their website, drawdown.org, they've got the solutions, ranked, what we need to do by 2050, the number of gigatons of carbon dioxide that can be drawn down, the cost, and sometimes there's actually a net savings. So not all of these things have to actually cost us a lot. But the, composting is number 60. Something I found really interesting is number 6 and number 7 are actually educating girls. Does that surprise you? No? Okay, so Paul Hawken said, we thought it was going to be a solar panel. It turns out it's a female, So if we really take care of nurturing our young women from an early age, then you can make better decisions that control your life, and, it just really goes from there. It certainly, that's compounded probably in other, cities or countries. But really good stuff. So anyway, this is just not really environmentally specific, but I like this little meme I found on Facebook. It's like, what would happen if we activated the local economy that already exists in every neighborhood? Like, as much as I want to do community building, I will tell you, in my tiny little subdivision, I know maybe 2 neighbors, 3 neighbors. There's a lot of turnover for whatever reason. People have their attached garages. I have a fenced backyard, and I'm as guilty as anybody. When I get into my house, the garage door comes down, and unless I go outside in the front and look around for somebody, or call somebody or knock on a door, it's real easy not to know your neighbors. So we've got this hidden capacity, we've got this excess capacity where, you know, somebody's got tomatoes that they would love to give you, but they don't know that you would like them. Somebody needs help with taxes, somebody's got homegrown basil, somebody, you know, we all have these things and we just don't know how to share them. So worms, again, back to composting the food waste. Does anybody use worms to compost their food? It's so fun. I just want to put in a plug. I did bring some of my books that I've written. My second book was actually about composting with worms, and it's a spiritual book. My editor is from New York, and she thought I was absolutely insane. It's called Women Living Consciously. And she was like, do you get it that this is spiritual? I'm like, do you get that composting is spiritual for me? So it starts with like, I kneel at my Worm Factory 360 with offerings of eggshells and coffee grounds or whatever, but like just that smell of earth, real earth. This is part of regenerative agriculture that I learned in permaculture. Our number one biggest export, do you know what it is? What is it? Topsoil. Topsoil, yeah. And because like you look at these things, they're washing off, you know, we've got so many forests that have been clear cut, or we've got so many parking lots, you know, Pave Paradise put up the parking lot. The parking lot, it means that there are less, you know, porous surfaces where that water can go to recharge the, you know, the water supply. So it's a big challenge to create enough soil that actually supports, you know, good food and also, you know, water too. So there are just many, many reasons I love composting, but this is a close-up of my worms. And, you know, giving people worms to start their compost bin, or sometimes people are like, oh, I'm not really sure I know how to do it. Can you make a house call? I don't want to have a business card that says Kathy the Worm Lady. Like, what would I charge for that, you know? But so this is like a perfect time bank thing that I can do. Also, worms themselves are regenerative. They eat half their body weight every day. So if you have like 5 pounds of worms and your household generates 2.5 pounds of food waste, you know, including the coffee grounds, or they can do yard scraps too, that's a lot of soil that you could be producing because they poop it out. That's the compost, right? So it makes this beautiful, beautiful compost, and they also double in size every month or so if they have sufficient space and food. I don't have sufficient space, so it just makes sense to give away the worms and to get people helping. So in any case, time banking was perfect for me. So instead of having to kind of roll my eyes or feel like burdened, like here's somebody else that wants me to go give them this thing, now I can say I'm charging 2 hours for my time and maybe a half an hour for the worms or whatever, and they're not writing me a check, but it's, again, based on reciprocity. So now with the time that I've spent on them, I could maybe get some nice young person to go rake my yard while I'm out doing the worm bin. You see how this goes. This gal right here is one of my local heroes. Her name is Aja Yassir. If you're from out of the area, I doubt you would have heard of her, but you never know. She actually has gotten picked up by several news sources around the country. She is fighting for her right to grow food in her front yard in Gary, Indiana. If you've been to Gary, Indiana, I think they got a lot bigger issues than a woman who wants to grow food in her front yard. But she was actually notified that she was going to be taken to court on Earth Day this year. Earth Day.
Nice.
I'm like, ooh, a little tone deaf, a little, you know, not thinking about things. But I met her last fall at an event that was hosted by the Northwest Indiana Food Council. They do something called a farm hop, and she's clearly not a farm, but she's an urban homestead. And she grows over 200 medicinal and edible plants in her relatively small, you know, yard. Her backyard is very shady, so it's important to her to grow food in the front yard. She also happens to live in a food desert. She'll have to drive 18 miles to get to a store where she could, you know, buy the organic stuff that she can just walk out into her front yard and pick otherwise if she's not allowed to grow it. So that really got to be under my bonnet, and I've been kind of helping her. We did a podcast interview. We started a petition.org for her, and we're just racking our brains. They keep like pushing her court date, and it's actually, I think, next week or next week or two now. So we kind of did a peace offering of let's build a wall. You know, you hear build a wall in the news all the time, but we're building a wall for regenerative agriculture. She's got a lot of wood chips in her front yard that build soil and they support, you know, just these really wonderful plants that normally wouldn't grow here, but it kind of creates its own little microclimate. We found a local landscaper that donated the paving bricks, and during the Solidarity Sprint last week that I mentioned, it was a group out of Madison, Wisconsin called the Mutual Aid Network. They were kind of doing projects like this where many hands lighten the load and you come together to do something. If she were to do this just with her husband and her little girl, it would have been very expensive, time-consuming, back-breaking, but instead we had about 12 of us and we knocked it out like that. I think her wall looks fabulous, and we're hoping that that's going to be enough to keep the city fathers, you know, happy, or mothers, or whoever they are these days. Anybody like mushrooms? Has anybody been mushroom hunting? Yay! This is a chicken of the woods mushroom. Have you ever seen one of these out and about? Yeah, they're kind of beautiful, and they actually do taste like chicken. Have you had one?
No, I've seen them on
You've seen them?
Easter eggs at a camp.
They're really gorgeous, and they have this texture that's kind of like chicken. Some vegans won't even eat them because they swear it kind of tastes like chicken. But people knew I was a mushroom hunter, and so sometimes chefs would say, hey, we're doing a farm-to-table dinner. Can you get me like 30 pounds of wild mushrooms? I mean, I'm good, but I'm not that good that I can just on the spot that day go out and find 30 pounds. I mean, if you pick them much before, like a day or two before the event, they're not gonna be great, you know? So I thought, how am I gonna be able to say yes to that? I have the skill, I have this, you know, notary public superpower that I can do, but I can't just manifest these things. You can't like cultivate them, you just literally have to go find them. So what I started to do was cast a net out to time bankers or just to Facebook in general and say, has anybody seen these? And this woman who lives at this place with the little lake and everything, she was like, hey, I have one of those. I'm not gonna eat it, come get it. And I waited, it was like, this isn't actually the one, I don't know that I took a picture of that one, but it was like close to 20 pounds. So I told her about the time bank, and I told her I'd like to give her credit, and she just said, well, can this mushroom be my donation for me to join the time bank? And I said, absolutely, that works. So it's kind of fun. I love that that's also regenerative. When you pick a mushroom, you're not picking the whole plant, you're just picking the fruiting body of that plant, and there's still a whole mycelium network, like we talked about before, how that is what helps the trees to communicate underground. So this thing, it doesn't hurt the mushroom, it does kind of hurt the tree. They've got a symbiotic relationship where it is actually slowly killing the tree, but us removing and eating the mushroom is gonna do it no harm. So in any case, Barry up at the Shoreline Brewery used that in one of his farm-to-table dinners, and we've done that a couple of different times now, which is pretty cool. And this is kind of fun too. You know, sometimes I will share my secret spots. Like this guy that I'm friends with, he wanted to know where can I get native plum seeds because he really wants to kind of grow every kind of native tree. And so I kind of like to pick those plums. I didn't necessarily want to tell him, but if